Long ago, in a place we now call Iraq, a great story began. This land was special. It was cradled between two mighty rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. The ancient Greeks gave this fertile area a name, Mesopotamia, which means the land between the rivers. The water from these rivers made the soil very rich and good for farming. People learned that they could grow crops here year after year. This was a huge change for humanity. Instead of wandering from place to find food, people could build permanent homes and stay in one area. This was the start of a new way of life. This new way of life led to the creation of the very first cities in the world. Imagine a place with no cities, and then suddenly they began to appear. In the southern part of Mesopotamia, a group of people called the Sumerians built remarkable cities like Ur and Uruk. These were not just small villages, they were large, organized centers with thousands of people. They had big buildings, busy markets, and strong walls for protection. The people living in these cities were not just farmers. Some became priests, some became soldiers, and others became artisans who made beautiful pottery and tools. Life became more complex and organized. The development of cities required new forms of leadership and rules. To manage these growing populations, the Sumerians developed the first form of government. Each city-state was ruled by a king who was seen as the representative of the city's main god. The king's job was to lead the army, make sure the laws were followed, and oversee the building of important structures like temples and canals. The temples, called ziggurats, were massive stepped pyramids that stood in the center of the city. They were not just places of worship, but also acted as administrative centers, where food was stored and distributed to the people. The environment of Mesopotamia was both a blessing and a challenge. The rivers provided life-giving water, but they could also flood unpredictably, destroying crops and homes. To control the water, the Sumerians built an impressive system of canals and irrigation channels. This was a massive undertaking that required careful planning and cooperation among many people. By managing the water, they turned the dry land into a green and productive landscape. This ability to shape their environment was a key reason why civilization flourished here, setting a pattern that would be followed by people all over the world for thousands of years to come. The people of ancient Mesopotamia were incredibly clever inventors. One of their most important contributions to the world was writing. Around 3500 BC, the Sumerians developed a system of writing called cuneiform. They used a reed stylus to press wedge-shaped marks onto wet clay tablets. At first, they used pictures to represent objects, but soon the marks came to represent sounds and ideas. This was a revolutionary invention. For the first time, people could record their history, laws, stories, and business transactions. They could send messages over long distances and pass down knowledge from one generation to the next. The world was forever changed by this ability to write things down. Another world-changing invention from Mesopotamia was the wheel. It is hard for us to imagine a world without wheels, but they had to be invented. Around 3500 BC, the Sumerians first used the wheel, not for transport but for making pottery. A potter's wheel allowed them to create pots and bowls much faster and more evenly. A few hundred years later, they adapted the wheel for transportation by creating carts and chariots. This made it much easier to move heavy goods, trade with distant cities, and move soldiers during wartime. The wheel made the world feel smaller and more connected, transforming trade and travel in the ancient world. The Mesopotamians were also brilliant mathematicians and astronomers. They looked at the night sky and carefully observed the movements of the stars and planets. This was not just for curiosity, it helped them create accurate calendars, which were vital for knowing when to plant and harvest their crops. They developed a number system based on the number 60. We can still see the influence of this system today. It is why we have 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and 360 degrees in a circle. Their mathematical knowledge was very practical and helped them in building, farming, and trade. These early Iraqis also created the first written laws. The most famous of these is the Code of Hammurabi, created by a Babylonian king around 1754 BC. This was a set of 282 laws carved onto a large stone pillar for everyone to see. The laws covered many aspects of daily life, from business deals and family matters to crime and punishment. The idea was to create a fair and just society where everyone knew the rules and the consequences of breaking them. This concept of having written laws that apply to everyone was a fundamental step in the development of justice and government. After the time of the Sumerians, Mesopotamia was ruled by a series of powerful empires. Each empire built upon the achievements of the one before it, creating a rich and complex history for the land of Iraq. The first of these great empires was the Akkadian Empire, established by Sargon the Great around 2334 BC. Sargon was a powerful leader who united the different Sumerian city-states into one large kingdom. This was the first time that so many different cities were brought together under a single ruler. His empire controlled trade routes and brought a new level of political organization to the region, creating a model for future empires. Later, the city of Babylon rose to become the center of a new and powerful empire. Its most famous king was Hammurabi, who is remembered for his code of laws. Under his rule, Babylon became a magnificent city, known for its wealth, power, and culture. The Babylonians were skilled builders and astronomers. A later Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar II, rebuilt the city on an even grander scale. He is said to have built the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, for his homesick wife. Babylon became a symbol of power and luxury that was famous throughout the ancient world. To the north of Babylon, another powerful group, the Assyrians, built their own mighty empire. The Assyrians were known for their strong and disciplined army. They used iron weapons and horse-drawn chariots to conquer a vast territory that stretched from Egypt to parts of modern-day Iran. Their capital cities, like Nineveh, were filled with impressive palaces decorated with detailed stone carvings. These carvings often showed scenes of the king's military victories and hunting expeditions. The Assyrians also created one of the world's first great libraries, where they collected thousands of clay tablets from all over their empire, preserving knowledge from earlier civilizations. Eventually, the great empires of Mesopotamia fell to invaders from the east. In 539 BC, the Persian Empire, led by Cyrus the Great, conquered Babylon. The Persians created the largest empire the world had yet seen, stretching from India to Europe. For the land of Iraq, this marked a new chapter. It became an important and wealthy province within the vast Persian Empire. The Persians were generally tolerant rulers who allowed the different peoples they conquered to keep their own customs and religions. They built excellent roads, including the famous Royal Road, which helped to connect the diverse parts of their empire and encourage trade and communication. A new era began for Iraq in the 7th century with the arrival of Islam. The message of Islam, carried by Arab armies from the Arabian Peninsula, spread rapidly across the Middle East. By the year 637, the region of Mesopotamia was brought under the rule of the new Islamic Caliphate. This was more than just a military conquest, it was a profound cultural and religious transformation. The Arabic language and the Islamic faith became central to the identity of the land. The new rulers established administrative centers, and many of the local people embraced the new faith, which would shape the region's destiny for centuries to come. In the 8th century, a new dynasty of rulers, the Abbasids, came to power. In 762, the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur decided to build a new capital city. He chose a location on the banks of the Tigris River and called his new city Madinat al-Salam, the City of Peace. We know it today as Baghdad. This was no ordinary city, it was designed to be the magnificent center of a vast empire. It was built in a perfect circle with the Caliph's palace and the Grand Mosque at its very heart. For the next 500 years, Baghdad was one of the most important cities in the world, a center of power, wealth, and culture. This period is often called the Islamic Golden Age, and Baghdad was its shining star. The city became a global center for learning and discovery. The Abbasid caliphs were great patrons of science, art, and philosophy. They established a famous library and academy called the House of Wisdom, or Bait al-Hikmah. Here, scholars from different cultures and religions, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, worked together. They collected and translated important books from Greek, Persian, and Indian traditions into Arabic. This incredible effort preserved ancient knowledge and also led to many new discoveries and innovations. The scholars in Baghdad's House of Wisdom made huge advances in many fields. In mathematics, they developed algebra and introduced the Arabic numerals we still use today. In medicine, they wrote important books that were used in Europe for hundreds of years. In astronomy, they built observatories to map the stars with incredible accuracy. The city was also a vibrant hub of trade, with goods coming from as far away as China and Africa. Its markets were filled with spices, silks, and other exotic products. For centuries, Baghdad was a beacon of civilization, a place where knowledge and commerce flourished. The glorious days of Baghdad's golden age came to a tragic end in 1258. A huge Mongol army from Central Asia, led by Hulagu Khan, swept across the land. They captured and destroyed Baghdad, burning its libraries, including the Great House of Wisdom, and killing many of its inhabitants. This was a devastating blow from which the city and the region took a very long time to recover. For the next few centuries, the land we know as Iraq was ruled by various Mongol and Turkic dynasties. It was a period of instability and decline, and the great irrigation systems that had supported the land for thousands of years fell into disrepair. In the 16th century, a new and powerful empire rose to dominate the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans were a Turkish dynasty with their capital in Istanbul. In 1534, the Ottoman Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent, captured Baghdad and made Iraq a part of his vast empire. For the next 400 years, the land would be ruled from Istanbul. The Ottomans divided the region into 3 provinces, or vilayets: Mosul in the north, Baghdad in the center, and Basra in the south. This division would have important consequences for the future of the country. Life under Ottoman rule was mixed. The Ottomans brought a degree of stability and order after centuries of chaos. They were Muslims, like the majority of the population, which helped them to rule. They rebuilt some mosques and public buildings and tried to maintain security along the important trade routes. However, for much of this period, Iraq was a distant and sometimes neglected province of a very large empire. The local governors appointed by the Sultan in Istanbul often had a great deal of power, and their rule was not always just or effective. The region did not experience the same level of progress and development as the heartlands of the empire. By the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire was growing weaker and was often called the sick man of Europe. European powers, especially Britain, became increasingly interested in the region. Britain was interested in Iraq because of its strategic location on the route to India, which was the most important part of the British Empire. They were also interested in the region's potential for oil. The Ottomans tried to introduce reforms to modernize their empire and strengthen their control over provinces like Iraq, but it was too little, too late. The stage was being set for another major change in the history of Iraq. The 4 centuries of Ottoman rule in Iraq came to an end during the First World War, from 1914 to 1918. The Ottoman Empire sided with Germany, which meant they were fighting against Britain and its allies. Britain saw an opportunity to secure its interests in the region. British forces, mostly from British India, invaded Mesopotamia, landing in the south near Basra in 1914. The fighting was really difficult, and the campaign took several years with heavy losses on both sides. By 1917, British troops had captured Baghdad, and by the end of the war in 1918, they controlled all 3 of the former Ottoman provinces of Mosul, Baghdad, and Basra. After the war, the victorious powers met to decide the future of the lands that had been part of the Ottoman Empire. Instead of granting them independence, they created a new system called the Mandate System. Under this system, Britain was given control over Iraq. The official purpose of the Mandate was to help the new country develop its own government and prepare for eventual independence. However, many Iraqis saw it as just another form of foreign rule, a new empire replacing the old one. They felt their hopes for true independence after the fall of the Ottomans had been betrayed by the European powers. The British made a very important decision that shaped the future of the country. They decided to join the 3 separate Ottoman provinces of Mosul, Baghdad, and Basra into a single new country called Iraq. This was the first time these 3 distinct regions with their different populations had been combined into one political unit. The north was mostly Kurdish, the center was mostly Sunni Arab, and the south was mostly Shia Arab. Drawing these lines on a map and creating a new state was a difficult task. This diverse mix of peoples who had never been part of the same country before would create many challenges for the new nation. To rule the new country, the British needed a local leader. They chose Faisal, the son of Sharif Hussein of Mecca, who had been a key ally of the British during the war. In 1921, Faisal was installed as the king of Iraq. A monarchy was established, but real power remained firmly in British hands. The British controlled the government, the army, and most importantly, the country's growing oil industry. The creation of modern Iraq was therefore not a simple story of independence, but a complex process guided by British strategic interests, especially the desire to control the region's vast oil reserves. Iraq formally gained independence from Britain in 1932 and was admitted to the League of Nations, the forerunner of the United Nations. This was a significant moment, as Iraq became the first of the mandated territories to achieve official sovereignty. However, the country's independence was limited. Britain still maintained a strong influence over Iraqi politics and its economy through special treaties. The British military kept air bases in the country, and the British-owned Iraq Petroleum Company controlled the nation's most valuable resource, oil. For many Iraqis, true independence had not yet been fully realized, and this created ongoing political tension. The period of the monarchy, which lasted from 1921 to 1958, was a time of political instability. The government was often controlled by a small group of wealthy elites who worked closely with the British. This created a great deal of resentment among other parts of the population, including army officers, nationalists, and ordinary people who felt that the country's wealth was not being shared fairly. King Faisal I died in 1933, and his successors struggled to manage the deep divisions within the country. There were frequent changes in government, and several coup attempts as different groups competed for power and influence in the new state. A major turning point in Iraqi history occurred on July 14, 1958. A group of army officers led by Abdel Karim Qasim overthrew the monarchy in a violent revolution. The king, the crown prince, and the prime minister were all killed, and the Hashemite monarchy that the British had installed came to a bloody end. Iraq was declared a republic. This event was celebrated by large crowds in Baghdad, who hoped it would bring real independence and a better future. The new government pulled Iraq out of the pro-British Baghdad Pact and began to establish closer ties with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. The 1958 revolution marked the beginning of a new era, but it did not bring lasting stability. The years that followed were characterized by a series of power struggles, military coups, and political purges. The dream of a united and prosperous republic proved difficult to achieve. Different political factions, including Arab nationalists, communists, and Ba'athists, competed for control of the state. These internal conflicts continued for another decade, creating a climate of uncertainty and violence. This turbulent period eventually paved the way for the rise of the Ba'ath Party, which would come to dominate Iraqi politics for the next several decades. In 1968, the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party seized power in a successful coup. This event marked the beginning of over 3 decades of Ba'athist rule in Iraq. The party's ideology combined Arab nationalism with socialist ideas, aiming to create a strong, modern, and unified Arab state. For several years, power was shared among different Ba'athist leaders. During this time, a young and ambitious politician named Saddam Hussein gradually rose through the party ranks. He was known for his intelligence and his ruthlessness. By the mid-1970s, he had become the most powerful figure in the country, even before he officially became president. Saddam Hussein formally became the president of Iraq in 1979, and he would rule the country with an iron fist until 2003. His government used the country's immense oil wealth to fund major projects in industry, infrastructure, and education. Literacy rates improved and a modern healthcare system was built. However, this development came at a very high price. His rule was a dictatorship. There was no political freedom, and any opposition to his government was brutally crushed. His secret police created a climate of fear, and many thousands of people who were seen as enemies of the state were imprisoned, tortured, or executed. The decades of Saddam Hussein's rule were also defined by devastating wars. In 1980, Iraq invaded its neighbor Iran, starting a brutal war that lasted for 8 long years. The conflict resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths on both sides and left both countries' economies in ruins. No sooner had the Iran-Iraq war ended than another conflict began. In 1990, Iraq invaded and occupied its small, oil-rich neighbor, Kuwait. This action was condemned by the international community and led to the First Gulf War in 1991. A large coalition of forces, led by the United States, quickly drove the Iraqi army out of Kuwait. The aftermath of the Gulf War was very difficult for the people of Iraq. The United Nations imposed strict economic sanctions on the country. The goal of the sanctions was to pressure Saddam Hussein's government, but they had a terrible effect on ordinary Iraqis. There were widespread shortages of food, medicine, and other essential goods. The country's infrastructure, which was heavily damaged during the war, could not be properly rebuilt. For more than a decade, Iraq was largely isolated from the rest of the world, and its people suffered greatly. This period of hardship and isolation ended with the US-led invasion in 2003, which removed Saddam Hussein from power, but also began a new and challenging chapter in Iraq's history. The 2003 invasion marked another dramatic turning point in the long and complex history of Iraq. The fall of Saddam Hussein's government was swift, but it was followed by a long and difficult period of conflict and instability. The country faced a violent insurgency, sectarian violence between Sunni and Shia communities, and the rise of extremist groups like Al-Qaeda and later ISIS. For years, daily life for many Iraqis was overshadowed by insecurity and violence. Rebuilding the country and establishing a new stable political system proved to be an enormous challenge for both the Iraqi people and the international community that sought to help them. Today, on June 9, 2025, Iraq is a nation that continues to look toward a more peaceful and prosperous future, though many challenges remain. The country has a democratic political system, with regular elections for its parliament and government. This is a significant change from the decades of dictatorship. However, the political system is often fragile, and politicians must work to overcome deep-seated divisions and build trust among the country's diverse ethnic and religious groups. A major priority is rebuilding the economy, which is still heavily dependent on oil. The government is working to create more jobs for its young population and to attract investment in other sectors. Iraq's cultural heritage is a source of immense national pride and is important to the entire world. The land that was once Mesopotamia is home to countless archaeological sites that tell the story of the dawn of human civilization. After years of conflict, there is a renewed effort to protect and preserve these ancient treasures. Museums that were looted have been working to recover artifacts, and archaeologists are returning to conduct new excavations. This rich history reminds Iraqis and the world of the incredible contributions their land has made to human progress, from the invention of writing to the great scientific discoveries of the Golden Age. Looking ahead, the people of Iraq face the difficult task of building a shared future. They must continue to work on healing the wounds of past conflicts and strengthening the institutions of their new democracy. They must also manage their precious resources like water and oil wisely for the benefit of future generations. The journey of Iraq, from the world's first cities to the complexities of the 21st century, is a powerful story of resilience. It is the story of a people who have endured empires, invasions, and internal strife, yet continue to strive for a future of peace, stability, and dignity in their ancient and historic land. If you enjoyed this journey through Iraq's history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories from around the world.